So with all we can't take from spring games, scrimmages, practice pretty much is what it is. When those wide receivers line up against DBs and you see who wins one-on-one battles, is that maybe the one matchup you can take the most out of?
It really depends. Like it was, you know, what happens is when you have 15 practices, really it's more than that because you know these guys. So you've done off season workouts, you've done 7-on-7 in the off season. You've come in and you've done your practices, you lift. You know, like their little the intricacies of what they can and what they can't do. So you end up you kind of cheat the process sometimes, or and even in the game. But like what you can take away from it is this: is that Johnny Wilson is what he is. I think he's had days in practice where he's looked amazingly good. He's also had times when he's more of a big possession wide receiver. He's not a stretcher. What you can look at is what Micah Pittman's able to do as he can in a short amount of time. He's your dynamic playmaker. He does really really good. He did that in the scrimmage. He did that in this. Also in practice, I think sometimes you're trying to get quarterbacks to take risks, and you're trying to get DBs to take risks, and you still can't hit the quarterback. Where I think where it's going to help our offense get separation is when you have to account for Jordan Travis's legs, and our DBs don't have to account for that because they know they're going to blow the whistle like as soon as you get within a halo of him. So I think it's tough to realize that, and I will say this: I don't like it. I'm not a huge fan of it. I don't like how they don't really practice true wrapping up. We called it thud when I played, so it was like, but we had Buzz.
Uh-oh.
Might be reconnecting. Are we connecting?
I don't know if we're reconnecting. Otherwise, Logan, you're going to have to finish his sentence, and you're going to have to take it from there.
Well, during my time,
and then Buzz.
Yeah, during my time when I was goal line facing against Miami, that was really a rough game for me. No, but I get what he's saying. So he's talking about, he wants to allow some of these plays to continue. Jordan Travis, at least in the spring game, there was a lot of early whistles and wasn't allowing Jordan Travis to do what he does. But also in practices, you don't see the guys fully tackling each other. And I think that is something where, you saw Chuba Purdy get hurt and you lost him and was still might be recovering from his collarbone injury. And that happened because of a physical scrimmage that happened 2 years ago. And I don't know if that has something in part of, maybe protecting players in the spring and making sure they're healthy. And Florida State did a pretty good job of that this spring. We're still waiting to hear some more on Darius Washington and the extent of his injury. And I know there's a few guys that were banged up after the spring game that we saw at yesterday's practice. But, I think that's just Norvell kind of keeping things a little bit safer. Do I wish they would be hitting a little bit more? And I will say, at the extent, maybe I know definitely when James was here, those were a little bit more taps, not fully wrapping up and stuff. I will say though, in the last week and a half of practices, those guys started, they got a little chirpy and then intense. And Norvell talked about that. These guys were hitting a little bit more. Is it full contact, fall camp, board drill type stuff? No, well, at least we're not seeing that. But, the latter half of this spring scrimmage, or spring camp, there was definitely a little bit more physical nature. You got Jared Verse getting into it with a few offensive linemen, Robert Scott and him. Those guys were battling near the last half of that spring camp because you got to see Jared Verse getting chances with the ones. And Verse is a guy that chirps and will let you know if he won that rep or not. And those guys get irritated after a while. And so it got chippy there and this last half of the spring camp. But that's kind of how it goes. I think Norvell kind of wants to keep these guys a little bit safer. But I do wish, and Norvell kind of admitted it yesterday in the press conference after practice, wrapping up spring, saying, talk to Jordan. And some of those whistles were a little too early, and Jordan wasn't happy about it. And, I think I definitely know where James is coming from, where, that could allow for practices to be a little bit better if this whistle wasn't blown so right away. And you could really see what you're getting out of some of these guys and the abilities they have to maybe track down a few players or really see how well they're tackling skills are. So it's just a safe, and that's just how spring is. And I think it's a smart decision. Because you had a few guys that were injured this spring camp that they were a little nerve wracking kind of injuries while we were there watching, and then you see that end up being able to recover and come back, and that's a really good sign. And so Florida State didn't have a lot of really bad injuries. We're still waiting on Darius Washington and that some intel there on what's going on with him.
So Logan, based on what we know of Norvell's first 2 August camps, do we expect there to be practices, or at least a couple, where they're practically hitting full go?
I think there's definitely going to be it's going to be a little bit different than spring. I am expecting that. I think it's going to start off kind of like how I was talking about how this last couple of weeks of spring camp has been, and it's how it should be. You're going to allow some of these true freshmen too to come in. Not a big group, because you got a lot of your early enrollees already on campus, but you're going to see a little bit more physicality, but not starting off right away. But I think Norvell tries to keep things safe for the most part. Yeah. But are these practices just tapping people and then that's about it? No. That's not how, at least how it's been at the end of this camp. But earlier, just playing it safe, making sure guys aren't getting injured. But guys were battling for depth charts, man. After that, heading into the first scrimmage, after that, it's been intense. Guys definitely in one-on-ones, going up high. There's been some scary situations and a little nerve-wracking for me to see, but Norvell's keeping them going and was keeping them going. So, and we'll see. But I think the biggest thing is you got a pretty healthy team heading into your summer.
Yeah, and it's a fine line. Trying to keep everybody healthy, keep them relatively fresh. Don't wear them down. But at the same time, it's more about just that one hit, fracturing a wrist or a leg or whatever the outcome is, versus, the teams get a little bit more of a buffer playing Duquesne the first game of the season than they have in the past, lining up against Alabama, Virginia Tech, Notre Dame, those kind of teams. And then if they would have had to play LSU out of the gate, I just can't imagine not hitting the entire off season. And then all of a sudden you got to hit an LSU running back in the open field, and you got to have that type of intensity and the technique in a split second without having those reps. You just can't get up to that game ready speed.
Yep. I think what James wants is to see Trey Benson go up and face Lundy up the middle, and that's I'm 100% down for that too. And were they doing that in practices? Yes, they were. But it wasn't full force, and I wish things were full force. I'm sure it was a whole different era from when James played and now. That's definitely a little obvious that things are a little bit different nowadays. And do I wish we go back to that? Absolutely. I like physical practice. It really shows who really wants it, and we got to see that this spring. And